Hello everyone, it is time for this week's live stream. So you'd think we would have a great topic like every week, but it's been kind of a heck of a week. And actually my room that I'm in right now is uncomfortably warm, and I wish it was a lot cooler. So we're going to talk a little bit about what happened this week as well as where I was last weekend. I thought we'd just do that, and then we'll wrap up. We won't take a super long stream today because I have people coming over around 3:30. Hi Amar, how are you? Hi Lisa. So hopefully everything sounds okay and looks okay and you're enjoying the video of the reef in the background. I'm going to get myself some green fabric for my chair to hide the chair because I know it blocks part of the view, but I need to sit on something and this is the only choice I have at this time. So last weekend I flew to DC to speak to the WAMAS club, the WAMAS club. They have been around for a super long time, at least 20 plus years, and they are super cognizant of making sure their visiting speaker is well taken care of. They basically spoiled me rotten, which was great. I loved it. And you know, I've spoken to many clubs over the years. I am a public speaker and I enjoy it. And you know, you get from being treated like a king to, okay, you're doing us a favor. And these guys at WAMAS were super kind and took me out to eat, took me to Dave & Buster's where we played Halo until we conquered the game and I won multiple times, which was pretty cool because I don't play games very often. And after that we, you know, I called it a night, and the next day we were off to see the Washington Monument, which is the big spire that often, you know, they kept calling it the pencil. I don't know, it doesn't look like a pencil to me, but I got to go to the top, which I've never done before, and that was pretty interesting. I didn't know anything about the history of this monument. It's been around forever. I just know it exists in DC, but it turns out it took something like 40 years to build, and they took a break during the construction because of the Civil War, and then when they resumed, the stones don't match. They actually look different, which is interesting too. And then it finally got completed, and there's little windows at the top, and you can take an elevator up, which is great because it's 550 feet high. Can you imagine if we had to take the stairs? Oof. So we had a really good time up there. I got to look north, south, east, and west, so I could see from a distance the White House and the Capitol and Supreme Court and stuff like that, which is kind of neat because you only hear about those on the news or you see it in a movie getting blown up. But I got to see the real thing in person, which was pretty cool. And then I had to give my presentation to a nice crowd, and I was speaking about sumps and plumbing and, you know, the best way to have that all set up and the things to consider. And one of the nicest compliments I got was when someone that's been in the hobby a super long time said, I learned some new things I'd never heard of before. And I was just like, that's awesome, because I want to reach the entire audience. I'm not just trying to reach brand new people. I'm also not trying to be expert level to where new people feel left out. I want everyone to feel included, and hopefully someone walks away with something new that they can work on, apply, implement, or just consider for their next build. So that was good. I'm glad that went well. And then we went to eat again. And if you guys know me, I've got a sweet tooth, and if you don't know me, now you know that. So when we went to dinner, you know, we ordered our drinks, and then they said, who wants appetizers? And I was like, appetizers? That's great. I'll take the carrot cake. And everyone just kind of laughed at me, but no, I had carrot cake. And when they brought this big slice of carrot cake to the table, they brought 2 spoons, which made no sense because I don't share. I'm an only child. So I ate the whole thing myself while they ate whatever they ate, deviled eggs or something. And then we had our dinner, which was good. And then they said, who wants dessert? And I said, carrot cake. That time I was joking. I didn't do it twice. But I did enjoy my trip there. And then I flew home. And when I got home is when I came to an uncomfortably warm house, which is the topic of today's discussion. The house was warming up. I had the dehumidifier running because it was full, so it turns itself off. And the room was getting warm. And I thought, okay, let me hit the thermostat and drop it a couple of degrees. And I did. And then, you know, a little while later, it felt warmer. And I went to the thermostat to drop it another degree, and it was 4 degrees hotter than where it had left off. And I thought, oh no. So I called the AC company, and for me, you know, I don't want to be uncomfortable, yes, but I care about my reef tank even more. Jack and I can go to a hotel if we had to or something if it's bad, or stay in the studio, you know, where there's a separate air conditioner system, but the reef tank can't be moved, and it has to be the same temperature all the time. Now I keep my reef between 76 and 77 degrees. It's literally a 1 degree swing every day for the past year. Before that, I used to run a little bit warmer, but last year I lowered it in anticipation of adding the Japanese pygmy angelfish, and I thought I need the tank to run cooler for this fish, which I know sounds a little bit crazy, but at the time, if I want this fantastic, beautiful, expensive fish to live, I want to give it optimum conditions, and I really hoped my reef could accommodate this lower temperature. Well, as many of you know, I didn't actually put the angelfish into the reef after all. I moved it into its own tank, and I never changed the tank temperature, and my reef has just done so well that there's no reason to warm it up warmer. So 76 to 77 degrees every single day. Then when the AC basically broke, the tank was heading to 79.5. And so that's already 2.5 degrees hotter than normal, and it wasn't, and no end in sight. The guy came out to look at the system. He basically took off the cover, which I could smell as I walked past it. It smelled like burned electricity. And when he took off the cover, he was like, yep. There's a big like motherboard in there, and there was a big burn spot right in the center of it. And that's why the air conditioner wasn't running. And he said, oh, well, if we have this in stock, we can then swap it out, but we may not have this in one of our 2 warehouses. So I was very concerned about that. And I thought, here we go. You know, what's going to happen? So in the meantime, what do I do to keep the reef alive while the house is too hot? First thing I did was I went to 7-Eleven and I bought, you know, an ice chest full of ice. And I put these big bags of ice in the sump. You know, they're like, you know, I think the bags are smaller. I think we used to get 10-pound bags and now they're 7. So anyway, I put in 14 pounds of ice in the tank, and the tank dropped a degree. And then, you know, 20 minutes later, I put in 2 more bags of ice to bring it another degree down. So now I've got it closer to where it normally is. I also took a Ziploc bag filled up with ice and put in Caitlin's tank, because that tank also was warming up. And that tank normally is 75 to 76. It's even a degree cooler. And that one was already at 78, and I wasn't happy about that. So I'm playing, you know, ice tricks with them. I also have some cooling fans built into my sump that are designed to come on when the tank gets too warm automatically, and they do. And the thing is, they usually run on low, and the house is usually enough temperature that if they need to run, they run, just to kind of take the edge off, just to create a little bit of evaporative cooling. But it's not the cure. It's just a little help, which I found has made quite the difference. So what I have is 3 4-inch fans that are actually embedded into the top rim of the sump, and they point straight down and blow on the water, and the Neptune apex turns on and off as needed. Well, because the house was warmer, I need these fans to run at a better speed. They actually have a thermistor on them, which is a wire that senses the temperature of the room, or the ambient temperature, and the hotter it gets, the faster the fan runs. And I thought, man, I need these fans to run faster than what they're running. So I took the thermistors and I actually zip tied them onto my Reef Bright Refugium light that's already a little bit warm to the touch, and just that contact with the metal was enough to get the fans running at a higher speed. And then finally, I had a roll-around air conditioner that I've been using in my garage, I don't know, 6 or 7 years, and I went ahead and brought it back into the fish room where it used to be years ago. I hooked up the exhaust pipe back to the hole in the wall that I put in so long ago with a vent that goes into the attic, and I turned it on to blow cold air into the fish room and close the door to kind of trap some of the cold air in there to help with the reef. Now, because I haven't done my woodwork, it wasn't a sealed room and air is breathing all around the sump and around the tank, but at the same time, I was getting some colder air into that room versus 0 air at all on the rest of the house. And then I went to Home Depot because they were about to close. It was Sunday evening, and I picked up a large orange fan that I went ahead and let's see if I can throw it on the screen here, because I did grab that picture. Where did I put it? Downloads. So I got this fan. It's a specific one. Oh, here's some ice. So there's a bag of ice in the sump, and then this is the air conditioner. That you can see it's going through a tube in the wall, and that was just set at like whatever 64 degrees, just run nonstop. And then while that that air conditioner is pushing the cool air in there, I went ahead and put this fan on the tank as well. So this is a smaller one from Home Depot. A lot of people like to buy box fans, but I thought I'd rather get this one because it will basically fit on top of the external overflow of my reef tank. So this is an $80 fan versus a $23 fan, but I can use that in the future for other purposes. So I just felt like it was a good investment. And when I posted what was happening, Terrence Fugazi, who used to work at Neptune, he actually recommended, basically bolting that thing to the wall forever into the room and set it up with the apex. And if the tank ever gets too hot, literally kick this fan on, which isn't a horrible idea, actually. I can't necessarily bolt it to the wall, and have it point in the right direction. Maybe I can come up with something. But in the meantime, what I did was I had this hitting the surface. And so you have the random flow generators shooting water one direction, and then you had the fan hitting from the other direction. It was really causing interesting things on the surface. It looked completely different than I'm used to seeing. But between all of that, I was able to get my tank back down to my 77-degree level, which was good. And then that night, so that's just a few hours, right? Then that night, the temperatures dropped down in the 60s. I thought, okay, we'll open up the windows, which I never do. And we had, some fresh air blowing through the house, and around 2 a.m., a huge thunderstorm rolls in, and because all the windows are open, it's super loud. So you got the lightning, the thunder, the rain coming down, and every time the thunder goes off, Jack jumps. And here we're supposed to be sleeping. And I'm already doing good to try to sleep in a humid, uncomfortable house. And the breeze does not just blow perfectly through my bedroom. It's got to go through walls. And so we try to survive it, but then I think it was around 4 in the morning or something like that, and I realized that Jack had moved completely to the top of the bed and was curled up against my head and against the headboard and was trembling. She was just so scared of the sound, which normally she doesn't hear because with the windows closed, it's outside. Now it sounded like it was happening inside the house. So my poor dog was all stressed out. I felt bad for her. So I went ahead and closed up the windows. The house was a decent temperature in the middle of the night, and we went back to sleep for a few hours. Woke up the next morning, and I called the air conditioner company, and I said, so do you have it in stock? And this is where it gets so frustrating. Now listen, I bought my unit a long time ago. I bought it in 2009. But I bought a 25-year warranty from that same company that covers all parts and labor. So technically, anything that breaks, they got to cover it for 25 years, until 2034. So I have very little inclination to get a new unit when I'm guaranteed repairs forever, basically, that I paid for back in 2009. I spent a lot of money back then. And so when it breaks, I'm basically getting reimbursed for that money I gave them back then. However, as you know, with warranty work, there's no time constraint. They will fix it. They promise to fix it, but it may not be as quick as I want. So anyway, here it is Monday morning, and I called them up and I said, do you have the part in stock? What's the situation? And they said, well, we don't know. They were closed yesterday, but they're open today. And I said, I know. That's why I'm calling you today, because they're open. What did you find out? So the woman says, I will call you back as soon as I have an answer. So 3 hours later, I haven't heard a word, so I called again. And I got a different woman who said, the part has to come from the factory or from the manufacturer. It's going to take a couple of weeks, and then we'll call you to schedule an appointment to install it. I'm like, absolutely not. What do you mean a couple of weeks? You should be overnighting this part, which, again, with warranty work, there's no guarantee someone's going to offer to overnight a part, right? But the point was, I was really upset about this. That's going to take too long. We're in the 90s here. The house is too hot. It's too hot for a reef tank that's got $20,000 worth of livestock in it. I need to keep my reef safe. And I know that doesn't matter to you, but these animals I've had for 19 and 20 years, they shouldn't have to die because there's a burned up board and air conditioner. I need you guys to fix it. So then the lady says, well, if we have it in stock, we'll go ahead and get you set up. And that's when I was like, are you kidding me? You still don't know if your warehouse has it or not? That's why I called you for the second time. Put me on hold and find out if you have the part in stock. So she put me on hold for a few minutes, and then she came back and she said, no, it's not in stock. We need to order from the manufacturer. They'll ship it when they ship it. We'll get it when we get it, and then we'll schedule a time to come out. And I said, listen, the day that thing arrives, you can just give it to your handyman. You send him here immediately. I don't care what day or time it is. I work from home. I live at home. I'm always here. There's, don't add any delay. Don't say we got to wait in a couple of days, And so she's like, okay, I hear you. And she hangs up, and you could tell she didn't care. However, as many of you know, I have a Bobby. And I was lucky enough that Bobby literally made a pit stop on Monday during all of this research that I'm doing trying to get my AC working. And he said, that woman doesn't care. And I was like, well, I mean, she has no reason to care. It doesn't affect her personally. I mean, basically, I need the air conditioner in my house that they use in their offices that never breaks. And so we Googled, we looked around, and we actually found that part within 30 miles of my door. So even though they say it needs to come from the manufacturer, I'm thinking it's right here. I could literally have it back at my house within an hour, but the place that sells it doesn't sell to the average Joe. It only sells to air conditioner companies. And I don't have an air conditioner company credit card, though I might open one up. Because I love cold air, okay? I probably run the AC 10 months out of the year here in Texas. Even when it's February, it's like, it could be cold for a few weeks, but then all of a sudden it's warm, and I kick on the AC. So the part was $300, and I was debating, should I buy this thing and put it on, and then when they show up with a real one, the real one, their official one, take mine out and save it for when that thing burns up again, because my warranty is good for another 11 years, and in 11 years, that board could burn up again. And I was debating, and I had several friends, tell me, just get what you need and get it running, and don't worry about when they're going to get to it. Why should you suffer? And I couldn't disagree with that. So anyway, we went and looked at the unit closely, and Bobby was like, well, we might be able to bypass some stuff and get you operational. And I was like, anything is better than zero. So we looked at it. We discovered that it was possible to get it running in low mode, which was not ideal, but of course it's not 100 degrees right now, so we're okay. And so the house has been limping along somewhere close to the 70s, which is, the low 70s, which is what I need. And that way the reef tank was safe, and Caitlin's reef was safe, and, everything I did helped. There were days where I did run the air conditioner in the fish room on top of what the house was limping along with. I also ran the dehumidifier, which literally had to be emptied every 12 hours for the last 5 days in a row, because normally the AC, when it's running, it sends a ton of water down the drain from condensation. And it's pulling the moisture out of the air and it's sending it down a pipe. And if you don't know how much water is coming out of your AC unit one day, you could just point that drain into a bucket and be shocked. Like I was, probably 10 years ago. There was a time when I think the drain was clogged. It was probably 20 years ago. And the drain was clogged, and so of course it was going to ruin the carpet in the hallway, so I stuck a bucket under there, and I thought, okay, I'll just empty that out, in the morning. No. Within a few hours, that bucket was almost to the top. I was like, oh my God. And that's when I found out that my house accumulates 14 gallons of water a day comes out of the air while the AC is running. That's a lot of water. And, a dehumidifier pulls out 32 pints, which I don't even know what that is. Is that 3 gallons of water? It's not very much. So I was emptying it every 12 hours, keeping the house from being super humid, muggy, sticky. And the air conditioner was running in low mode, which is, it needs overdrive to do its job. But it was enough to make it where we could sleep at night and not be miserable. We didn't have to go to a hotel. The tanks didn't overheat. So that was good. I did talk to Frank at Frank's Tanks and say, is there a possibility maybe borrowing a chiller? But I didn't want that. I mean, yes, a chiller would help, and it would keep the tank at the right temperature, but the chiller would be pumping out heat into the room nonstop, making the house even hotter. So that's why I don't like chillers. It's that reason and that reason alone. A chiller is a little air conditioner, basically, that chills the water, and as the water flows through the chiller itself, it cools the temperature down so that the tank stays the right temperature, but the room gets hotter and hotter from the hot air coming out of the chiller, which is why you have an air conditioner to compete with that. There are split chillers on the market. I've seen them in the past. They're pretty expensive for a tank my size, but you'll have the unit outside and you'll have the coil inside, and it will work similar to how an air conditioner works, where you have a coil inside and you have a thing outside. And that way you don't have the heat, you don't have the noise, it's all outside, and you have the chilling. But my tank never needs it except when the air conditioner breaks. And so for me to buy a chiller for the once or twice a year that I'm down for a day or two normally, I just don't see the point. And then you also have to say, well, how much money are you really going to spend on all of your backup solutions? There is a limit to your budget. There is only so much money to go around. You still got to buy groceries and buy clothes and pay the electric bill and things like that. So for me, everything I've got in place is good enough. It's not perfection. I mean, what would be the ideal would be an entire second air conditioner out there waiting for the first one to break, where we just flip a lever and it switches over to number 2. But this house is not that big, and there's no justification for having multiple air conditioners in the house. So I'm not doing that either. But that is where we are at on all of that, and that's how I kept the tank, coolish throughout the week. And then this morning, the guy was here probably around 10-ish. I didn't even look at my watch. And I thought, okay, great. He'll just swap out the board. He'll be done. The house will cool off. But then it turns out that when he got the board in there, he had to connect all the wires to this motherboard. And the spot that had burned so badly, do I have that picture handy? I don't know if I do. Oh, I should. I guess I don't. Nope, because it's in my camera. Sorry. But I do have this one here I could throw on the screen maybe. So there is the giant hole that burned through it. Now it turns out that that spot that burned had a white 6-prong socket, which I believe is called a Molex connector, but I might be wrong. Anyway, that connector was completely gone. And you know what else was in that connector? The plug part that all the wires are on. So when he got his new board and he put it into place, he didn't have the other end that has to plug into the socket because that was all fried and melted away and was ash on the grass. So he went off to Home Depot and then to Lowe's looking for this very specific connector, which of course they don't sell. And he ended up having to rig the system with a temporary external relay that will now provide air. And he literally finished 1 minute before the live stream started. I said, if you don't finish soon, you're going to be on the live stream with me explaining this to the audience because you get to be a guest because you're here and you're interrupting my show. And he laughed and he's like, no, I'm not entertaining. And I thought, oh, I'll make you entertaining. But so anyway, cool air is supposedly trying to blow in here now, which would be really nice. And, hopefully in a few more hours, the house will be cooling off because it's still a slightly uncomfortably warm in here. And the only way to be comfortable is to not move. Don't breathe, just lay there, have a ceiling fan spinning, and relax. But if you were wondering what techniques you can use to cool down your tank, the stuff I discussed in the beginning of this live stream should help you. Ice is usually one of your cheapest solutions, and you can, if you have the foresight or if you have a freezer big enough, you can freeze bottles in advance, like 20-ounce bottles, 2-liter bottles, and just have them, like 80%, 90% full of water. Don't fill them completely, because as you know, you put a bottle of something in your freezer, it can explode and make a mess. So you want to have enough space in the container so expansion can happen and not rupture the plastic bottle. And then you can take those bottles and you can put one in the tank, and then as it's melting, you have another one in the freezer. And then, when the first one's melted, you can take the first one out of the tank, put the second bottle in your tank, and put the first one back in the freezer. And you can kind of rotate through bottles when you're trying to get through a situation. Last year, when something broke on my AC, I remember spending $80 in ice for that day, and they resolved it that day. And usually that's the case, but this time it was the motherboard. And not really sure why the motherboard burned up, but there's a potential that it was storm related, because the night before we had these massive lightning storms happening while I was in DC, and apparently, through Bobby, because he tells me everything, he said the lightning coming down was like giant, huge, thick bolts. It was not these little veins you see in the clouds. It was huge, and like 30 houses caught fire. So it could have been a surge went through the lines and zapped my board and just took it out. But, I guess I'm lucky it didn't zap anything on the reef tank, because the apex didn't take a hit. The hydros didn't take a hit. Nothing. The computer, everything, nothing in the house was damaged. It's just the AC took a hit. Or maybe just the board was tired after all these years and decided to commit suicide. I don't know. But Cooling with ice is number 1. Cooling with a fan is number 2. Cooling with a separate air conditioner would be number 3. And you can rent them if you need to. You can get really big ones that have a huge tube to come off, and then you have to like somehow shove that into your attic or shove it out a door and then somehow plastic off the door to keep the outside air from coming in while you're running this thing. But there are ways to survive. But basically, in my situation, I personally just basically hot-wired my system to work for a few days and hoped the board wouldn't give up what was left of it. And it did. It survived all the way through when this guy showed up. And, this morning, he had to turn it off to do his work. And, of course, while he was doing his work, the house was warming up again. Let's see. Let me check and see what the tank temperature is right now, just for curiosity's sake. We'll open up Fusion first. And the reef is at 76.6. Yes, that's good. Nice. And the frag tank, by the way, it got pretty warm. It got all the way up to 81, but all that's in there is 10 million Mahanos and 3 clownfish, so that's okay. And you know what? That tank, it doesn't matter if it gets too hot because there's nothing sensitive in there. The clowns can handle a little bit of heat for a few hours. But the SPS corals, the ones that are behind me in this video, they would not handle, when they're used to 1 degree change every single day for a solid year, and then suddenly it's 2.5 degrees hotter. I was very concerned about that because I didn't want to see a bunch of colonies just turn white because they got, baked for a while. So that's why I was so adamant to get the tank temperature down and keep it down. And I think the Hydros app is on here too. But if the reef is the right temperature, then the Hydros is as well. So I can't pull that up right now. But that's how I handle it. And I would love, if you're watching this video after the fact, after the live stream's over, and you have solutions you use to keep your tank cool, I'd love to see you post those in the comments so that others can benefit from your knowledge as well. Because we all have personal experiences that we go through, and we all are trying our best to keep our animals alive and healthy and happy. But, Murphy is always looking for a way to ruin your life. And so we always have to fight back at Murphy and like, oh, really? Then I'll do this. One thing I will throw in there, if you're in a situation that's really difficult and you are like, oh my God, what am I going to do? I'm just throwing it out there. You can break out your credit card and abuse it to solve the problem, okay? I mean, like I was considering spending $300 to get that board myself if there was some way I could purchase it, but I had a feeling when I drove there they would not give it to me. The other choice is to buy it online and wait a couple of days. But, oh, I didn't even tell you. I didn't even tell you. So remember they said it'd be a couple of weeks, and somehow he managed to show up on Saturday, what is that? He came Sunday, he came on Saturday. It's basically 7 days apart, 6 days apart. Showed up to install it. Well, when did it get here? It was here Wednesday morning. They called me and they said, okay, we have the part. Now remember, I called Monday and said, do you have it? And then I said, I can't wait 2 weeks. What the heck are you doing? And they said, well, it'll get here when it gets here. And then on Wednesday morning, they have the part. So was it shipped to them? Did they drive to a local resource? Did they have it in their warehouse after all? I don't know. But they had it on Wednesday. So Wednesday morning, they're saying, so we have it. Let's see when we can squeeze you in. And they said, listen, the installer, the guy that did your work, he is on a install right now, which means he's literally putting in a whole new system for a house. And then he has 2 repairs, and 1 repair is a 4-hour repair. So he's booked for today. I was like, okay. And then she said, he's off on Thursday and Friday. I'm just like shaking my head like, so he's off for a couple of days. Send a different repairman so I have cold air. But because my house was limping along, I wasn't being exceedingly crabby because I was okay. I was okay until that board blew up. If it broke completely, then I would have been super, angry and upset and like, absolutely not. And, you will get your guy here within the hour or else, But because they had the part. They had the part Wednesday morning. And so when the guy showed up today, I said, so did you enjoy your 2 days off? And he goes, oh man, I work so much. Like, I'm giving you a hard time. I get it. I'm just surprised they didn't send someone else because you didn't have like some massive history with this machine. You saw it Sunday, you saw a hole burn through the board, and you left. Anyone else could see the same situation and handle this. And he's like, the way this company works, when you start it, that is your job. And if you have to go back to repair it later, it's the same paycheck. You know, it's like, it's my responsibility now, which is kind of crappy. But yeah, so they actually had the part Wednesday, but I had to wait for Saturday for them to install it. So crazy, right? But anyway, hopefully we're good to go, and we will go through all of summer with no surprises, and I will be a happy little camper all year long. And you know, that'll be the end of it. But again, the reason I am not like buying a new unit that's more guaranteed is because I still have 11 years of warranty of parts and labor. So why spend $14,000 or $18,000 on a new unit when literally anything that breaks in there is included in my warranty, and they will just replace it and repair it. Yeah, Michael's saying no supply houses will sell you unless you have a master's license. Okay. So it can't even be just my credit card. Because it's like, if I show up with a Milev's Reef Inc. card, will they do it? Could I say it's Milev's Reef? We work on air conditioners? I don't know. But you know what? I did talk to the owner of this company a couple of years ago. I said, listen, I need you guys to get extra parts on my unit. And he says, we don't do that. I said, I know, but you know, at the time, I said, you've got like 13 more years of warranty on my unit. Are you telling me in the next 13 years you don't think those parts are going to break and need to be replaced and should be sitting on a shelf ready to go? I mean, literally, you should be buying the major components and putting Levinson on the side and put it on a shelf for the day I call you so you have it in stock. And he's like, we don't do that. And I was like, I kind of think you should in this case because you have 13 more years of repairs ahead of you. Just seems logical. I mean, like I said, having a second unit sitting next to the first one is not the craziest idea in my brain. But, you know, I'm not the AC company. I'm just the guy that signed a contract with them that they have to honor until they go out of business. Okay, all right, so that caught you up on all of that. Let's go ahead and answer some questions because, like I said, I think I have people coming over today in 45 minutes. Let me double check. Let me see what's happening on Instagram because I'm almost certain DFW Mass has a thing today. Oh, here we go. The app is like, you need to log in. Oh, it doesn't want to cooperate. Let me do this. I'm going to cheat for 1 second and then I'll go answer your questions. If this thing ever loads. Please stand by. Yeah, it's today. I thought so. Thought I had that right. I should also mention right now that for next weekend is Aquashella, which is happening here in Dallas, and there will not be a live stream next Saturday because I will be at that show Saturday and Sunday. But you know, you're welcome to come see me in person. And by the way, I had several people at DC say, Mark, you know, I watch your live streams. You know, I love tuning in and hearing what you have to say. And they said, but I was really excited to come see you in person. I said, so you came to my live stream? And he laughed. You know, so yeah, being in person is even better than doing it through the computer. But it is nice that we can connect this way each week and catch up on things and kind of get your questions answered, because that's the whole point. We want to be able to be successful in this hobby and take care of our tanks and have the knowledge to know what to do when you're struggling. Reef Lab says, I'm currently researching heating and cooling for my shed lab. Well, Reef Lab, what you can do is you can get a split AC system from Amazon. The one I'm looking at right now for my garage, because I'm going to replace the one that rolls around, was $909, and it puts the main unit outside, and then you have this head that's inside, and it runs tubes, and you know, it runs the Freon or the whatever is used inside those things to cool, and the power all through a cable that goes to the outer unit. The outer unit gets hooked up to a quick disconnect, which is part of your breaker system. And and I'm just simplifying it, but basically that's what I have in my studio right now for a 400 square foot building, and it works perfectly. It worked fantastic last summer. It worked great all winter, and I'm putting the exact same thing in my garage to keep that room cooler. It'll take up less space than what I have right now because I have that roll around unit and I have my chimney going up the wall. And to be honest, I want to rip that all out, but that chimney came in really handy this week when the AC broke. So the benefit of having a system, like I'm describing, a split AC system, they're usually economical. You can even DIY them. There's even one out there I think called Mr. Cool or something along those lines, but I'm getting a different brand from Amazon. And you hook it all up and it will basically take, let's say it's hanging on the wall right next to me right now. And it's blowing with a fan that's moving the air through it. The coils that the air blows over is what's creating the cooler air. And of course, when it's running in heat pump mode, the coils are hot and the air is blowing over, and so it's blowing the heat into the room. But the benefit is it's moving the air through the room, but it's not sucking air out and it's not putting new air in. It's basically recirculating your air and making it cooler or warmer depending on the season, right? And all the magic's happening outside. Now, the unit I used uses 110 volt power. And yeah, and it basically uses 10 amps, which is not bad at all. And so that's why I know that exact unit will work perfectly for my garage. My garage is another 400 square feet, just like my studio is. And the studio is working absolutely perfectly. There's days where I can just like turn it off and then turn it on when I need to, but usually I just leave it run on auto and let it do its thing. The difference is when I run the roll around one with a tube going out the back that has to, vent all the hot air out, through a window, a doorway, or in my case, out the attic, which is what I've done. I do it right out the whirlybird, and it goes straight out of my home completely. The problem is it's sucking in air from the room to process it, to cool it, and it's sending the hot air out. It's literally a vacuum cleaner that's pulling out some air out of the room all the time. And getting rid of that system and having the recirculating kind with a split system is so much better economically and better air-wise. It's the way to go. So a roll-around unit's like $400 to $500. A split system could be anywhere between, I don't know, $900 and $1,500. But that's where I would go with it. I would do another split system in a heartbeat. Let's see. Hi, Steve. I haven't heard from you in years. Where have you been? I mean, I know you're in Essex, but where have you been? Steve says, we're freezing here in the UK. I wish my tank needed a fan. Let's see. I'm looking for that next question. Oh, clog the drain. You'll find out how much condensation you're getting very quickly. Back to that, I didn't tell you how I solved that problem. So, of course, you think, I have a clogged drain, what do? You're going to call a plumber. But I happened to talk to a friend that night and mentioned the problem I was running into. And she said, I've got the solution and it's going to cost you like $1. I was like, that sounds fantastic. What do I have to do? She said, I already know you have a bunch of tools because you have an air compressor. I'm like, yes, I do. She said, you're going to get a PVC cap and you're going to drill a hole in the top and you're going to put it on top of that plumbing and you're going to take your air compressor with a squeezy air thing, like when you're blowing things off, and you put it in the hole and you just blast the air and it'll shove all that scum that's in the plumbing straight down the line. And I was like, okay. And so I basically cobbled together, a coupling and a piece of, actually I took knowing me, I used acrylic. I took a coupling, and I took a piece of acrylic and I glued it to the top with weld on, and I drilled a small hole in the top that matched the nipple on my blower. I set on the pipe, and I put the thing in there, and I squeezed, and shoo, it just cleared the line. And I didn't have to pay a plumber probably $100 or more to clear this little skinny 1-inch pipe. And it's been draining ever since perfectly, but I saved that little piece. It's actually still sitting in the AC cabinet in case I ever have to do that ever again. But I haven't had to do it once in like 15 years. But that's a really nice, simple solution that costs nothing. So keep that in mind if you ever are in a scenario where you need to make your AC drain and it's not draining. Let's see. Rick says the company should have come out to identify all issues before the board was ordered. That way you have all the parts. You know what he needed was the board and the harness. And he ordered the board, or they did, or they had the board. But they didn't give him the harness, and so he didn't have the very specific connector that is made specifically for this Goodman board. And, you know, I don't tell him how to do his job. I knew about the board. I did not know about the harness. It never even occurred to me. But Bobby had said he's probably going to need the harness to go with that board. And Bobby was right, because Bobby knows everything, and that's why I always say everyone needs a Bobby. So he, you know, the thing is, I would love to just have Bobby take care of it from now on, because he knows it. But the thing is, the parts would not be free, because that's part of my warranty. So even if, and plus, Bobby can't just drop everything and come over here on a dime just because my house is getting warm. He could show up in 2 or 3 days. He has a real job. He has a family to take care of. He has a reef tank to take care of. But, oh, you know what? I've got something else. Let me see if the pictures are on the iPad where I can dump them on here. I want to show you guys something new that I did. I think I shared it on Instagram too. Let's see if I've got them handy. Hang on a second. Because this was a Bobby project. Where is it? Everything's hiding behind my windows. Hang on, let me move this here. Go to downloads. I don't know if they're on here or not. Oh, this is going to take forever. Let me go to the iPad. So, something that I had to do for a long time, and I finally got it done, was install a safer way to run the generator with my reef tank when there's a power outage. Great, I have it. So we're going to dump this to the computer. And then we're going to throw it on the screen. So this thing right here is brand new in my house. It was installed a week ago. I bought it a year ago and it got installed. Why do you think I thought of this? Because Bobby's busy. And I said, Bobby, can you squeeze me in? I really need to get this project done. So to the left, there is a sub panel that is 6 circuits that go into the fish room. And that's what keeps everything operational aquarium-wise. And then I had a system set up to where I could hook up a generator to that sub panel to create power. But it wasn't the safest method in the world, and I wasn't very proud of it. So instead, what I did was I ordered this kit because Bobby said to get it, and I did. So this thing right here, this big brown box, has a monster pair of breakers that I think it's 50 amps because that's what my panel is. And it has it where you're either to the left or you're to the right. So if it's to the right, I think it's regular electricity. You shove the whole thing over to the left, and now it is generator power only. It's a safety thing, and you can get something like this installed in your actual breaker panel. That's another thing that a lot of home houses have, this monster breaker, and you shove it over, and now everything's on generator backup. But I'm using a gasoline power generator, and it has a super long cord that I connect from the generator to this panel. So underneath that panel, you see that big round hole with a lid that's folded down right now. And that is where you can put in a big plug to handle 50 amps. And this is the kind of plug you would use if you had an RV and you wanted to provide electricity to it, and you would hook up one end to the power source and the other end would plug into the RV, and now the whole RV has power. And so now I've got this set up, and I've also got a huge cord. Let's see, we'll up this. That plugs into that round plug. And it's kind of neat because the cord itself has a little light indicator. So if there's power going through it, there's a little light that shows up on that giant plug to show it's receiving power, so you know you got power there. And also when you plug it into that round hole and you lock it into place and you tighten like a bushing on the side, the lid that folded has a green light also showing that now the receptacle is receiving power as well. So this cord here is like a I think it's a 50-foot cord, and it goes to my generator. Let's see if I can find a picture of that generator for y'all. I didn't take these pictures in the right order. So now I have this huge plug that I shove into my generator, which I really like. It's so much nicer than what I used in the past. I've had 20 amp cords in the past. I've had 30 amp cords, but now I have a 50 amp cord, which is so much more power than I need for my fish room. My reef tank, you know, we did that video not too long ago where I talked about the power consumption of my entire system and how I'm not pulling that much power because I'm not using metal halides anymore. And so, and even my return pump is DC. You know, the Abyss pump pulls 165 watts of power. So between the Sky and the return pump, there's no juice used. The big juice is the heaters to keep the tank temperature up when the room is too cold or the house is too cold. So anyway, I've got this huge generator with this ginormous amount of power. Why do I need so much power? Well, now I can run extension cords to the empty outlets in the fish room because I have 6 circuits available. And I can run a plug straight to my refrigerator. I can run a plug, you know, I can run a cord throughout the house and hook up lamps everywhere to have lighting throughout the house. I can hook up, of course, the television and the router and all that kind of stuff, and even my computer to keep operational even during a power outage because I've got so much juice. I even could plug in a temporary air conditioner unit like the one that, you know, I showed you guys earlier. I could hook that up to bring in some cool air or plug in 1 or 2 space heaters because I have 50 amps to play with. So I have a huge amount of power available at this time now with this new setup. This is a generator I bought from Costco after the ice storm 2 years ago. It runs on gasoline, it runs on propane, or it runs on natural gas. I'm just running it with gasoline. And it's just a really nice unit. So if you don't own a generator, I highly recommend you get one. It's definitely the benefit to your tank is, I mean, electricity is the one thing we need, and the second thing we need is the right temperature. And if we can get those 2 things going on our tanks, we'll usually survive some of the worst scenarios. But that means you have to still be at the house. You know, if, like I think of all my friends in Florida that deal with these hurricanes and these mandatory evacuations, and you know, they'll hook up a generator and they have to drive away for 4 or 5 days. And a generator usually has enough fuel to run for maybe 12 hours, possibly less. And so you have to basically abandon your home and your tank and hope for the best. And you know, sometimes, you know, the worst happens. Sometimes you can get back sooner and you can get there in time. But, you know, I work from home, I live at home. I'm not in an area that has those kind of, I don't have hurricanes. We have tornadoes, but we don't have hurricanes. And so hopefully, you know, I'll never have to deal with some worst case scenario like that, and my tank will continue to live on and continue to bring you entertainment here on this channel. Chris, that's kind of, he says for the AC to work, you only need the indoor fan and the outdoor unit. It's pretty easy to make those run without the board. It's kind of what we did. Oh, thanks, Rick. Rick says you need to have a license and an account. Give me a call next time. I can get the parts for you. Thank you. Yeah, I was seriously debating, do I just want to buy these parts and just get them now versus, you know, wait this out? And I just kept thinking, man, because the thing is, I'm about to buy that air conditioner for the garage, which is, like I said, $900. And if I had to spend $300 on this, that's technically covered, that's like $300 I could use toward the new unit. And even Bobby says, man, I would not buy that board. Just let them bring the part. It's like, okay. So he talked me out of it so I could buy my nice one. Let's see. Jeremiah's question is, when you have corals with die-offs such as Euphyllia and acros, you simply cut off the dead portion and let it regrow. What should you do with something like an echinata or a Bowerbanki? What you can do with those corals is you can put them through a saw, like a wet saw. I use one from, who makes that? It's a bandsaw. And I did a video about it a while back, and I bought it many years ago, and I pull it out once in a while, and you just put a little water in the bottom of the saw, and it spins, and you push your coral through it, and you can basically cut off all the skeleton to just have the part that's alive. And it will continue to grow new rock and new skeleton and spread skin out. And that's one way you can do it. The other choice is just wait it out and hope the coral starts regenerating tissue and sending back over the skeleton. But that is super slow and could take years to get to that point. So that's why sometimes it's better to just trim things down. But you need that wet saw, that bandsaw. Oh, Chris says pour a tap? I'm going to say a cup full of bleach down your condensate drain, and it won't build up and clog. That's true, I've heard that. And I don't do that enough. So dump some bleach down that line from time to time would be a smart thing to do. All right, let's see. Bob says, I set up my first skimmer. Any advice how to tune it? Other than testing, is there a quick way to know it's working? When you put your skimmer in your sump, it usually has one knob on it, possibly two. The one knob would be to regulate how much liquid is in the body of the skimmer. So if your water's to here and you open the valve to let water drain out, the water line will drop down to here. And so you're trying to find that sweet spot to where the water line is right so that the bubbles frothing at the top are below the collection cup on top. And if you are trying to dial it in, that's what you want to do. Now, if you cannot dial it in, if the skimmer keeps wanting to overflow, at least initially stick something under to lift it up 2 inches. So if you had some egg crate, you could stack it. You could use PVC, and you could make a little tray that you set it on top of. You could 3D print something to put underneath. You could order a skimmer stand for me that would go underneath it, but of course I have to build it and it has to be shipped to you and you have to wait. But you just lifting it up 2 or 3 inches to make it where it's not sitting in as much water is one of the quickest ways to help dial in a protein skimmer. And other than that, it's just a matter of I let in all the air. I know some people like to tweak with the air nozzle. I don't understand why. Let as much air get sucked into the skimmer as possible. I don't understand why you'd ever want less air. Just let it suck in all the air it can and adjust that water line in the body of the skimmer to the point you don't really see the water. What you see is the foam happening at the top, and you want the foam to be right at the base of the collection cup. So here's the cup on top, and it's just foaming and frothing and boiling right here. And then as dirt happens, that dirt will work its way up the neck, and it will come into the cup. And that's it. Thank you, Chris. I forgot what that thing was called. It's a transfer switch. So I've got myself a fancy transfer switch. And maybe next time I pull out the generator, I'll just do a quick video and stick it on this channel for others that are wanting to mimic. And they can say, oh, if I ever wanted to do something crazy like Mark, I could do all of this. And I too could have 50 amps of power. Oh, that's kind of neat. Justin says they actually make a blowout fitting for AC drain lines. It's a ball valve with a Schrader valve on the side. You close the ball valve, you put the entire inflator on it, and then it's cheap in the scheme of things. Cheaper than my dollar solution? Let's see. Rather Be Traveling says, I'm pricing out solar right now with the house at 100% redundancy. Funny that over the last few days the power has gone out 5 times in the last week, but I also had over 6 inches of rain in 2 days. Thank you, Jeremiah. Yeah, the Griffin saw, that's what I used. Rather Be Traveling if you end up doing the solar thing. Good luck. I hope it goes well for you. I will probably never do solar. I'm a huge proponent of having trees and shade around my house, and my electric rate is so low that solar makes no sense. Problem Prone says, when you quarantine new fish, do you just observe and only treat if you see something, or do you treat regardless? I always put the fish into Safety Stop, which is my rapid quarantine system. In the past, when I did have a quarantine tank running, I'd buy the new fish, I'd put it through Safety Stop, I'd put it in the quarantine tank, and I would observe. And after 14 days or 21 days, usually 14, if I didn't see anything acting weird and the fish was doing fine, I was at that point ready to put it in my tank. But, best case would be get your new fish, put it through Safety Stop, which is a 2-part bath, that the first part is formalin, the second part is methylene blue. It's a 45-minute bath of formalin. It's a 45-minute bath of methylene blue, and then put into quarantine for 45 days. That's a super long time. And you might wonder, where did I come up with that number? Well, that's what all the public aquariums are using. When they set up, their systems, they don't want to get fish disease that's going to take out all their fish and ruin their exhibit. So anything that comes in, no matter where it comes from, goes through a 45-day quarantine. And if they get something new, like let's say they get a phone call from the airport saying, we have some, we have some illegal corals and fish that we have captured and they need to be donated to an aquarium. I mean, so somebody tries to import something they're not allowed to have, and then the government gets involved. And the agency discovers this, and they seize it. And then it has to go somewhere. They can't ship it back to the country it came from. It'll never survive. So it goes to a public aquarium. So if a public aquarium had a quarantine tank set up and they had all this livestock in there, and they get this phone call, and they're like, okay, yes, we'll send someone to the airport to pick this up. They go there and they get it, and then they put it into their quarantine tank. Even if those things were at day 40, all the new introductions go in that tank with the stuff that's already there, and they restart the clock to 0. And they have to go 45 days again. So a lot of times public aquariums will have several quarantine systems, so they can have one that, it's being used and the countdown is happening. And if something else happens and they get a phone call, they can put them in a separate system so they don't mess with the first group. But 45 days is a long time. For me, 21 days would be plenty to see if something crops up. And if nothing were to crop up, great. If something does, then you're going to take it out of quarantine, you're going to put it in a hospital tank and treat it there. You don't treat it in your quarantine tank. Rather Be Traveling says, speaking of building items, how do you measure the Peacemaker with a Euro brace? So, here's a picture that I send to my customers when they place an order so they can see how it sits. And this is how it sits on the top of my tank. So my tank has double Euro bracing. It has that big thick rail, and then it's got a little skinny one underneath it, which is actually technically thicker, to create that lip. And so in that lip is where I set my Peacemaker on both ends. So I need to know the length of the top piece if you're trying to order a Peacemaker that will fit on the lip of your Euro bracing. It'll either sit directly on the Euro bracing, it'll sit on the inner rim of a plastic trimmed tank, and I just need to know what that distance is. I recently had someone place an order and he said, it looks like 23 1/4. And he sent me a picture, and I looked at the picture with the tape measure and I thought, you know what, I'm gonna make it 23 1/8. And he says, okay, that sounds good. Because I'd rather it fit than be slightly too large, but we definitely don't want it to be too small. There's nothing wrong with having that top piece sit 2 inches on both ends, sitting on 2 inches of glass on one end and 2 inches on the other end, so it has nowhere to fall and it can't be bumped into the tank accidentally. But in my case, I made it to fit inside that inner rim. It works out really, really well. Okay. Rombifer says, if you leave your windows open when it's cool out, the fresh air will help your pH. I checked my pH and it didn't change 1 iota. Not a bit. I thought, oh, it's going to make a huge improvement because I never, ever let fresh air in my house. I am anti-fresh air. And when I woke up after that night, my nose was all stopped up. I was like, God knows what I inhaled throughout the night using this outside air inside my house. What was I even thinking? Let's see. Eric says, have you ever heard of pollen causing tank problems before? Everything's in full bloom around here and it's just starting to have some bacterial issues. Pollen, pollen kind of leaves like a blanket on stuff. So if you're seeing pollen in your house, like on the top of the black trim of your aquarium or on the lid of the protein skimmer, if it's to that degree, yeah, that could be a problem. But your protein skimmer should pretty much capture anything that happens to float in and hit the surface of the water. But if it's that great, then I would say close the windows and doors. At least right now, during the week or two where everything is just like insane. And then at that point, you can probably get back to opening doors and windows, and because now that stage of the plants have passed it already. Rick says, are you running UV? I can't remember. Nope, I haven't run UV ever. I've never seen the need. If I were to run UV, it would probably be on a hospital tank, maybe a quarantine tank, but I've never had the need to have that on my reef. And seeing the systems out there, how big they are, and what they require, and the constant replacing of the bulbs, and making sure that the feed pump is always running, just seems like one more thing for me to babysit, and one more thing in my way. And no, my tank has never seemed to need it, so I've never done it. I also don't run ozone. I never saw the need for that either. All right, let's answer a couple more questions and then we'll wrap up. Matthew says, I'm struggling with SPS and LPS. My tank is 11 months old. It started with dry rock and live sand. All parameters are in range. Nitrate is 20. I've got a clean ICP. The frags just slowly wither away. Is it a lack of the problem, as in a biological thing? You say SPS and LPS. There's so many factors. I've got 2 different videos on this channel. One is how to take care of SPS, and one is how to take care of LPS. And I'm going to basically give you some homework to watch those videos rather than try to answer it right now, because there's so much to it. But the bottom line is, it could be your parameter, while your water is measuring good, it could be there's not enough flow or there's too much flow. It could be too long of light at too great intensity. It could be bacterial, as in like brown jelly disease. I mean, you say wither. It could be fish nipping at corals. I mean, there's quite a few things that could be happening in your tank. But those 2 videos should cover pretty much anything possible, and it might help you dial in on exactly what's going on with your tank so you can get it corrected and be able to fix the problem and start putting in corals that live. But if your temperature is even like all over the place, like, you have this thermostat set with your aquarium, but the house isn't the right temperature, like I was talking about earlier, and so your tank actually gets hotter than your settings of if you have a controller. And that would be a problem too. We really want to keep everything locked in, get that 1 to 1.5, possibly 2 degree swing per day. Make sure salinity is right. You said everything came back perfect, but I don't think they check salinity on ICP. So you want to make sure that that is right as well, because you could be with some crazy number and thought you're 1.026 all this time, but your tank's actually 1.019, and that's why the corals are not doing well, because you're being told false information by your device. So double check salinity, that's an important one. Double check alkalinity, that's another important one. And everything else checked good with ICP, so good. But it could be your lights were on too long, it could be they were on way too intense, and you might need to bring it way back, or you might need to lift the lights higher away from the water. I mean, there's so many variables. But I hope that kind of gets you some thoughts, and maybe that'll help you a little bit. Jake says, I've read about someone getting poisoned by Palithoa coral. Ever heard about that and why my LFS gave me no heads up? Yeah, actually I've heard about it. I've talked about it on this channel a couple of times. I've done 2 different videos on this topic. And one of the things I've told people is do not lick your corals. Now, I know that's being me facetious. I mean, who licks a coral? But Palithoa can get into your eyes, it can get into your skin, it can get into your mouth. If you're fragging corals and your mouth is open, it could squirt right into your mouth and your tongue will get numb and you'll taste metal, like you're chewing on tin foil, that flavor. If you're working with corals, it could squirt you in the eye. That's why eye protection is good. Because I wear glasses, because I'm semi-blind, I'm protected in that way. But like if I'm working with corals, I keep my mouth shut. You'd be surprised what people do. If you just watch someone working, go to the next time you're at the fish store and just watch the person working in the tank, and you might see their mouth is just open. And anything could squirt in. So keep your mouth shut, wear a face shield if you want to, wear rubber gloves when you're handling Palithoa. There's also the risk of scrubbing rock, like people have algae and they take the rock out and they want to scrub it outside, and that scrubbing with a brush is aerosolizing everything on the rock, including Palithoa juice. And they might even be trying to scrub the Palithoa off. Or they want to take a propane torch and burn them off. Or they want to use a pressure washer to blast them off. Or they want to soak them in bleach and then they want to bake them in the sun, and that Palithoa poisoning, it's still there. Super dangerous stuff. You got to be very aware of it and handle with care. Now my tank has some in it, and I've had it for 20 plus years. And from time to time, I reach in and take out a cluster very carefully. I put it in a bag, I seal the bag, I put it in the trash, I wash my hands. I've never had any kind of palytoxin poisoning ever in my life, even though I'm very well aware of what it is. And fish stores may not tell you. I mean, it just depends who you're talking to. If you walked in and said, hey, have you heard of this? They will say, yeah, odds are they'll say yes. But Google is your friend. Masna.org has an article about it that you can read. And you definitely want to be careful around that stuff. Oh, thank you, Andrea. She's putting links in here for the videos. Reef Keeper says, I just got shot in the eye from a mushroom. Boy, did that hurt. Lasted several hours even after flushing. Yeah, we don't want any of the bacteria in the water to get in our eyes. And we're dosing bacteria too these days, so that bacteria could be getting into your system as well. So you want to be really, really careful about avoiding that. All right, let's go ahead and wrap up. Guys, I want to remind you that today is Water Test Saturday. Please do test your water. I did some testing yesterday. I'll just tell you one more quick story and then we'll wrap up. My system is connected to the Apex, which is a controller that has an automatic water tester called the Trident. And the Trident tests alkalinity every 6 hours. And for the last few days, it's been trending downward again. And so, of course, I checked the calcium reactor, which looks normal. I look at the Versa pump, which seemed okay. And I thought, okay, let me do some testing. So I tested the effluent coming out of the calcium reactor. It's coming out at 42 DKH. And then I tested the water of the tank, and it is at 9.5. But my Trident said that I was at 7.68, which was below 8. And I have alarms set up that if it gets below 7.9, contact me. And so I got notifications every hour saying it's too low. So I went ahead and I looked at the reagent bottles for the Trident, and it showed it wasn't empty yet. But thought, you know what? I'm just going to go ahead and swap bottles out with a brand new bottle and then just tell the machine I did that, which I did. And the very next test, it said it was at 8.55. And I was like, see, I knew it. It was just reagent. It wasn't the reactor. It wasn't the tank was low. I didn't need to dose anything to fix it. All I had to do was just update the reagent with a new batch, just like we do. And so like right now, my system is showing it's at 9.23, which is exactly where we want it to be, and everything's good. So when you're testing your tank, you want to make sure that your test kits are not old, your reagents are not old. Just because there's still liquid in the bottle does not mean you can keep using it. It's really important that you get a new test kit every single year and throw away the old one. They're only designed to be open for 12 months, and you're not supposed to go longer. And if you're using HANA checkers, they have expiration dates on those packets. And not only do they have those dates, but sometimes people discover that the reagent, I don't know, I just read stuff. But people will say, this was a bad batch of reagents. Like, oh my goodness, even that. So you're having to wait for new reagent to come in because it was a bad batch that was giving misleading information. So nothing's absolute, everything's a gray area. You gotta make sure everything's right. You gotta look at your livestock and see how they're acting. And if they are definitely in distress, find out what you can from your test kits. If you need to, order an ICP test kit from me, and you can send that off for a sample and have them check all the big major elements, and it can also check all the minor trace elements, and you can see how your report card comes in on your reef tank to see what you can dose in addition to what you normally do to improve things, to make it better, to get more balance, to get that ionic balance that's so critical to keeping reef livestock alive. So if you do all that and your tank is, you're staying on top of it, you will know. I had someone call me up the other day and said, my phosphate is 1.0. And I just thought, well, when's the last time you tested? Was it 0.99 last week? I mean, you let that get up there. I feel like you haven't tested phosphate in a while. So I just told him how to lower it, which would be Phosphate RX. And it's something I've been using for now, I'd say 13 years. And it works so easily. You just count some drops and you're done. And if you need to use that to lower your phosphate, good. Lower them down. Get them back where they need to be so your corals can be happy again. Other than that, I hope you guys have a great weekend. Like I said, I will not be here next Saturday. I will be at Aquashella. Come find me. And I hope you guys have a great weekend. Bye.